Hello and welcome back, casuals, to the second episode of the JEB Board Podcast. This is Grayson Applin, recording from Atlanta, Georgia. With me is the Luke Combs cosplayer, Nick Noah. We've got BB, Brandon, Braze Good Black. We've got Caleb Naylor, the poster child for Mustache Wax. And then finally, we've got the Dork of the North, Kyle Oberhart. Guys, how are we doing tonight?
Amazing. We got renewed for one more episode.
Yep.
Exactly. After we saw those millions of views roll through on our last episode, I was, we got to do it again. Obviously, we had some technical difficulties on our last episode, a little bit of choppiness here and there. Yeah, it was a little long as well, so we're going to try to cut that down today, and then hopefully we can actually hear BB today. So we'll try to figure that out as we go. So, well, getting straight into it, guys, not wasting any time. Fantasy football. The NFL is here. Week 1 starts Thursday.
Thursday night.
I know everybody's excited to kind of see how their teams play out. We kind of talked about our teams last week. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to do a best and worst matchup for our individual teams. So obviously that's going to be dependent on who the player is, what defense they're matching up against. If somebody picks a defense that going against the offense, so on and so forth. So let's start with our very own Dork, Kyle. Who do you have as your best and your worst player for this upcoming fantasy week?
So, best matchup for me this week is going to be Jefferson against Tampa Bay. As we all know, Tampa Bay is not going to be up to par this year. Sorry to say it, Grayson. No, you hate hearing it. But I think Jefferson's going to
I've
finish
accepted
with.
it.
I would not be shocked if he finishes with 2 touchdowns and over 100 receiving yards this game. I think he's going to show out, and it's going to be a great first game of the season for him. Now, on to sadder news. Let's go with my worst matchup. Sadly, I'm going to have to put Thomas in. Cup is just, we don't know yet. So Thomas is going to be who we're riding with. He's going against Tennessee. I think Tennessee's going to attack that Derek Carr. I think he's going to have a rough first game. He's not going to get the ball out as much as he likes, and I think they're going to be
If
on
he
Thomas
plays.
that whole game. Yeah, if he plays.
Well,
Well, either way, I guess there you go.
And Nick, that was a question I wanted to ask you. How do you feel about Kyle's worst pick specifically? We know you kind of
Michael
have some.
Thomas is going to find himself on the bench because, he's got a little spot engraved with his name because, that's where he loves to sit all season. Quote unquote injury. No. He'll probably play maybe 15% of snaps. So realistically, he sucks. I don't know, Kyle. I'd probably try and find someone either, on the waiver wire or something. You might have a better chance with Cup, even though he's listed day to day than Michael Thomas.
Well, Nick, usually you don't have to deal with people missing the first week, but man, I am just already kind of screwed on the first week of fantasy, so that's not a good
I thought it was your
look.
running backs that sucked.
No, what you mean, man? Come on.
Well, and so Nick, I guess with that, leading into you, who do you have as your best and your worst?
So my best, I was kind of deciding between Devontae Adams and Justin Fields. I'm going to go Justin Fields right now. He at the beginning of the season, he was rough, but he kind of found his spot in the offense. They've gotten weapons for him now, and he's playing the Packers. They're playing at home. They haven't beaten the Packers in however many years. But last year, his second game, he got them essentially 20 points. And so I think the step from year 2 to 3 with him, I mean, honestly, it's more like 1 to 2 because he never really played his first rookie year. But now with the weapons with DJ Moore and Khalil Herbert without David Montgomery taking up space, I think Fields is going to have a good opportunity to seriously make some damage against the Packers. My worst matchup right now, I was looking, is probably going to be Debo Samuel against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh looked really good. They're healthy. They've got their defense, and so I could see Debo becoming, fading a bit in that game. Now I would still start him, but just on my roster right now, Debo is looking like he's going to be the scary one to watch against that defense.
Yeah. Well, and going back to Fields too, let me ask you, do you expect him to develop his passing game more, or do you kind of see their offense being more like it was at the end of the year where he's running all over the place?
Yeah, I could see him probably putting in about 10 more passes. I think they'll trust him a little bit more. But at the same time, I think the run game's still going to be, heavily involved just because, again, between him and Khalil Herbert, that's going to be a good little, dynamic duo right there. And adding DJ Moore, they're going to get the ball to DJ Moore, whether that be, sweeps, but I still think DJ Moore has that, breakout potential where, a screen play to DJ Moore could end up to be 70 yards and a touchdown. So I think they'll pass a little bit more, but a lot of it's going to be, still similar to what it was last year. And I still expect Justin Fields to rack up the rushing yards, a touchdown or two.
Yeah, and I know I'm late on this, but I'm going to pull this up here. This is our best and worst matchup, and everybody watching at home, we're going to hold off on the Week 1 EVP for just a second and mainly talk about these matchups, but we'll go back to that later on. So I guess next, Caleb. Who are you looking at in terms of best matchups and worst matchups on your team?
Best matchups on my team have to be Geno Smith against arguably the worst defense in the LA Rams in the NFL. So the Seahawks offensive line leaves much to be desired, but Geno Smith has the weapons, and LA's just that bad to the point to where I think Geno's not going to have any problem putting up numbers against them.
Yeah. Well, what about your your worst matchup here, James Cook? I know he's going to be sharing a lot of touches because they have a pretty decent or have decent depth at the running back position in Buffalo. I know BB fangirled over Damian Harris last week, so that's one of the ones in the backfield. So, are you saying that he's going to have a bad week because of the Jets' defense, or because of the share of touches and share of possessions?
You took the words out of my mouth, Grayson. I would say that the biggest reason is, of course, because he's going to be rotated out. He's in a stable of backs, not so much, a definitive lead back. But I think where that makes it likely that he'll be a bust for the week, I think it guarantees it that he's playing against the front seven of the New York Jets because they're absolutely nasty.
I got you. BB. We see right here you got Lawrence for Indianapolis or against Indianapolis. How are you feeling about that matchup?
I'm feeling pretty good. I don't think the Colts defense is going to be able to handle Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, Etienne,
Ingram,
and I do think though that they're on the offensive side. They're going to try to be explosive, big plays. They're going to run a lot of I got a feeling they're going to go 3 and out a lot, and it's going to put the defense back on the field. Cooked again.
Yeah.
For my worst matchup, I got Derrick Henry versus the Saints. Coming in, the Saints are the top 10 defensive line, and I don't think the Titans' O-line is going to really hold up to the Cameron Jordan. Caleb, help me out here. Who's on there?
See, Cameron Jordan, Roach.
Yeah. So, I still think Henry will hit his projection quota, but I don't think he's going to have. I don't think he's really a good chance for him to have a breakout game.
I think it's more like touchdown based. If he scores, that's going to be his big
I got a feeling. I got a feeling that the success he's going to have is going to be 2 yards in a cloud of dust, and then HV power on goal line. So I think he'll probably get. I think he's projected to get.
We know you have a hard time reading, so just we'll bear with you here.
He's projected to get 17.1 points this week, and I would take that. But I think he's going to be around the 14-point mark.
Makes sense. Well, on the topic of your best matchup, Lawrence versus Indianapolis. I picked Ridley and versus Indianapolis myself. Let me spit some facts to y'all right quick. The Colts is an abysmal organization. That is a fact. Jim Irsay is the new Dan Snyder. That's a fact. He is the worst owner, especially with how he handled the Jonathan Taylor situation. Terrible. Next thing, they drafted AR-15 based off size and athleticism alone. Fact. What he did in college was average, maybe slightly above average for college quarterbacks. So they just drafted the guy because he was a 6'3", 230-pound freak of nature. On top of that, here's another fact for you. There is no one on that defense besides DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, and Shaq Leonard. I did not even know a single defensive back by name. Fact. So I think Calvin Ridley goes off. I say that Calvin Ridley hits at least 20 points this week against Indianapolis. I know a lot of people are talking about that Calvin Ridley, he's going to have that rust and this, that, and the other. There have been reports all up and down the Jaguars saying that he is one of the best receivers that has ever come through Jacksonville. And he is going to be the number one option regardless there. Christian Kirk was a good number one option last year. But when you have someone like Calvin Ridley, who's number one, basically in his prime now, but number two, that's just as athletic and as good a receiver as he is, I don't think there's going to be any question. Calvin Ridley, 20-plus points. On the flip side, my worst matchup, I went away from the individual players. I think my Miami defense that I have is going to catch some hell against the Chargers.
Agreed.
They just with like we talked about last week, Nick, the amount of weapons that the Chargers have between Eckler and Keenan Allen and Gerald Everett and who is Quentin Johnson, right?
Quentin Johnson.
Quentin Johnson.
Mike
and then
Williams.
Mike Williams is still on the team too. There's 5 guys right there on top of Justin Herbert, who could be a breakout for MVP this year. This would be his year to do that. So that's definitely going to be my worst matchup by far on that team.
And Ramsey's not playing.
And Ramsey's not playing. So, yeah. So the what?
I think he's out for another 6 weeks too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's out for a bit.
I read something today that said he's not coming back till December.
Ooh, that's longer than 6 weeks. But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, hopefully they can maybe like the defensive line can step up, put some pressure on there. But I know if they give Justin Herbert time, it's going to be a rough day. So hoping at least we can break even and no negative points. But moving on from our best and worst matchup, now what we want to talk about now is maybe who is going to be the week 1 MVP, not just for our team, but in fantasy in general. Who is going to have the most output out of anybody in fantasy? So starting with Caleb, obviously we have it right here, but if you would like to explain your pick.
Absolutely. So I could not agree more with Kyle. Kyle pointed out that Justin Jefferson is going to be one of his best matchups this week, and I could not agree more. For all the reasons I won't restate that Kyle pointed out, we share the same rationale. He's going to feast on Tampa Bay.
I mean, I don't disagree with you coming from a Bucs fan. I do not disagree one bit, unfortunately. Kyle, we see that you have Travis Kelce. If you would like to explain that.
Yeah, so, I mean, we all like a Thursday night shootout, don't we? Because let me tell you, Kansas City, Detroit, high-scoring game. You better put that over in, Nick. I know you like to. Favorite matchup right there is Patrick Mahomes and Kelce. I mean, it's connection. When you're within the red zone, you always see Mahomes go to Kelce. You know he's the dog. You know he's got that reach. You know he's going to pull it in when he's in that end zone when that pass is passed to him. I think he's just going to show out. Easily big time MVP this week.
I would, and on top of that too, with kind of like the lack thereof of Patrick Mahomes' weapons that he has this year, I'm sure he'll find ways to get it to his receivers. But there's been one constant, and it's been Travis Kelce for
Correct.
Patrick Mahomes. So
I think it's been
Nick,
like 77 games straight that he's had at least 3 catches.
Yeah.
not surprised at all.
He puts up receiver numbers. He's not a tight end. We can all agree on that. When you're looking at fantasy numbers, Kelsey's putting up receiver numbers.
Yeah, and a lot of their offense is just run where the defense ain't.
Yep.
Go to the hole,
Backyard.
catch the ball. Yep, exactly. So let's see. Well, Kyle, you explained Kelce. Nick, I know you've got 2 right here. You're trying to pick from.
Yeah, it's pretty tough because I keep coming back to it. 2 options here. You got Lamar, who's coming off injury. I would say half injury, half somewhat of a holdout for contract. He got his contract, and now he's coming up against Houston. I would say the biggest outlier or factor really would be Will Anderson. But even if Will Anderson gets 2-3 sacks, that's high. But say he does, that's the rest of the game that Lamar has to eat. And I think Lamar is going to put up big numbers. And so I think that Houston defense is just going to be rocked. Saquon, on the other hand, he's up against Dallas. Last year, he put up 22.6 points, 15.2 points. I think with how he got his contract, he's going to be playing for a big max contract deal with the way running backs are going. So he's got to play to keep his money and keep his spot. And so I think he's going to show out week 1. And Dallas, everything that you've seen through this offseason, it looks like they're sliding. And so I think Saquon's going to be set up to, potentially have one of those week 1, 3 touchdown, 2 rushing, 1 pass, whatever it may be. I think Saquon's going to have a equally good performance. So either one are great picks to have in week 1.
Yeah, I agree. You can't really go wrong. For the sake of my team, I hope Saquon breaks out. So, and then BB, seems like your pick was pretty straightforward on who you think your week 1 MVP is going to be. I don't know if that's confidence or what, but if you want to expound on that a little bit more, or if you've already said what you got to say, I understand.
Well, it's not even that. I think you said it for me about their defense.
I completely did. I think at let's see, abysmal organization, or say is the new Dan Snyder, AR-15 because of the size. There's no household
all the
name.
check marks.
Yeah, no household name on the defense. They're starting like a D3 player that just got done at like ITT Tech. So I think I said that.
Yeah, but besides that, if you double Calvin, Christian Kirk's going to be open. If you leave either one of them on Calvin on 1-on-1 coverage, he's going to feast.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very confident about him being able to distribute the ball, and plus he can make plays with his legs too. He showed it last year with little scrambles here and there.
Absolutely.
So
well, and then for mine, I picked Devontae Adams. He's playing the Denver Broncos. I believe me and Nick talked about it pre-show. Yep. He did bad things to Patrick Surtain last year. So I think
the stats if you need.
Yeah.
9 catches for 101 yards in the first game. The second game, he had 7 catches for 141 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. So I can see that happening again. Especially with the situation at the Raiders right now, where he is the definitive wide receiver and probably the only wide receiver that they have. They're going to, I think they're just Garoppolo's. I wouldn't be surprised if Garoppolo targets him 15 times, honestly. And 15.
That's what he got last year. He had 14 targets and 13 targets. So 15's right on par.
Yeah. So
15 drop.
So I think obviously they're going to try to double him, but Devontae Adams, I still feel like is in his prime. He may be starting to get on that back slope, but I still think he's in his prime. I still think he's trying to prove a point to everybody. So I think he's going to show out and have a great week 1. Well, since we're done with fantasy, let's go ahead and talk about some actual NFL. One thing we're going to start doing starting this week for the next 6 weeks is we're going to do a divisional breakdown of each team. So obviously we're doing a new one every week, but starting this week, we are going to talk about the AFC South. So obviously the AFC South is the Titans, the Texans, the Colts, and the Jaguars. So so starting with BB, since you had a lot to say about Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, why don't you give us your breakdown of that division?
Yeah, so I think the Jaguars are either going to run away with it, or it's going to come down to the last 3 weeks between them and the Houston Texans.
Interesting.
I got a feeling they're young, they're exciting football.
Yeah. So why do you? I was about to say, why do you say the Texans? Is it because they have a great video coordinator?
I cannot confirm or deny that, but I just think if you look at the division, Titans or not, I have zero faith in them because I got a feeling they don't know who their quarterback is at this point.
Yep.
Like we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm.
And the Colts are they're there.
Yeah. They're a team.
They're a team. They're not good.
They're still registered with the NFL.
Yep. They still have jerseys. They still play in a stadium.
Yep.
That's about all they have in common with the other top two teams.
Well, Caleb, what's your analysis on the division?
So, not to beat a dead Colt, but I can only say and reiterate everything, so I won't get into too much of the details because we talked about a lot of them already. Jaguars are looking good in Duval.
Yeah, agreed. Kyle, what you got?
Yeah, so obviously it's the Jags division to lose. Go back to the Colts, just idiots. You're gonna leave your rookie QB with no running back support. Just terrible decision. Terrible way to start off his career. Houston, give them a year or two. I think they'll start being better. But that young team
Agreed.
worries me. I don't think it's gonna be this year. And then Tennessee, what quarterback are you going to put out there? Man, you better hope you get something figured out because that quarterback situation is not it. So Jags, easily their division. Trevor Lawrence, I think, is going to dominate that whole division. And I don't see anyone coming close to him.
Yeah. Nick, I'm assuming you agree on that.
As shit as the Titans have been, I still think they come in second. I don't see any, maybe a 1-2 game improvement from last year, maybe, but it's not going to be a pretty season for them. D-Hop is, you've seen it with Julio, it's not a good translation. Again, it's just Jaguars to lose. If they don't win it, we have serious problems within that organization because they have all the weapons, all the tools. But I still think the Titans come in second. I don't think the other teams have it yet, especially the Colts.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree. Obviously, my hot take for the year was that the Jags have the best AFC record, and part of that is because I think they're going to blow through the division and win 6 easy games. I think their roster is stacked. I actually think that the second place race is going to come down to a little bit closer race than everybody's anticipating. Still think the Titans come out on top, but I think the Texans make a really good push. I think that D'Amico Ryans is going to start developing a culture down there as his first season as head coach. I think they're on the uphill and the Titans are on the downhill. They won't figure out the quarterback situation. They're going to try a lot of experiments with all 3 of the guys that are on the roster right now. Unfortunately, I hate to say it because I like him. I think D-Hop's going to be a non-factor because I think he can go out there and still perform, but you still have to have somebody be able to throw it to you. So I think his stats take a hit from last year. I still think he puts up good stats, but I think it takes a hit from last year. The Texans, like I said, I think they have a good young core. I think they kind of figured out their draft, what they needed and what they wanted. I don't know if CJ Stroud's the answer, but if he's not the answer, he's a good little short-term piece until they find the answer.
Probably better than Davis Mills.
Absolutely, 100. I agreed. And then finally, if you guys don't know my opinion on the Colts, I mean, you can rewind it about 10 minutes and see my opinion on the Colts. I just don't think that anything's gonna really happen with them and be worth anything there. I mean, I think they're the worst. Honestly, I think they might be the worst team in the league. We'll have
them
to
in
see.
Arizona are fighting for it.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, if they get 3 wins, I'll be impressed. So, but yeah, definitely Jags by far and away. Titans at second, Houston right behind them at third, maybe by 1 game, and then Colts bringing up the rear. Yep. Stretching out and going to the whole NFL. Like I said, week 1 is this week. Games start Thursday. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about some game predictions. We talked about 5 games that we kind of felt like are the top 5 games of week 1. And so we're going to go down and kind of break down who we think is going to win. So, Nick, starting with you, let's hear your picks for, let's see, just so everybody is aware, these are the games. We've got Detroit and Kansas City. We've got San Francisco and Pittsburgh, Cincinnati and Cleveland, Buffalo and the New York Jets, and then Miami versus the LA Chargers. So that being said, Nick, if you want to run through your picks.
Yeah. First, I've got the Lions beating and upsetting Kansas City. People look at that game and it's a quick, it's the Chiefs. They're, reigning Super Bowl champions. Lions have something to prove because they barely missed the playoffs last year, but they're an upcoming team and they had one of the best offenses, statistically last year. Whereas their defense was the problem. And so I could see, the Chiefs every year you see they lose one game in the first 5. I mean, it's always a slow start for them. That's just how it is. So I could see the Lions taking them. I've got the 49ers taking it. This is my favorite game of the week because they're playing Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh looked damn good during the preseason. So you're going to have Kenny Pickett. He's going to be coming out and, trying to establish himself and have that jump from rookie year. But I still think the 49ers have too much defense. And it's going to be exciting to see how Brock Purdy plays now that he's established himself truly as their number 1 quarterback and coming off that injury. I've got Cincinnati next. Cincinnati, I think they just have too much for the Browns to handle. But as we've seen in the last year, Browns they win weird games. Nobody expects it. So I'll say if Browns do win, I wouldn't consider it that big of an upset or that big of a shock. Next, I've got the Jets. I think the Bills have been slipping, and the Jets have a ton of momentum. Now, this isn't me saying the Jets are a Super Bowl team, but week 1, they're going to ride that momentum with Aaron Rodgers, and they're going to come out and, kind of establish an identity. And you always see that, teams start out hot and then fizzle. That could happen, but I've got the Jets, and then I've got my Chargers. Tua's coming back, and their biggest question is their offensive line. That Miami does have the offense. Granted, Chargers bring a lot back on defense and add J.C. Jackson back from injury, Eric Kendricks, and so it's really a matter of that offensive line for Miami. But I've got the Chargers.
Gotcha. I guess let's go to BB. BB, how we feeling about week 1? Your slate of games. How we feeling?
Week 1. So I got Kansas City at home. They're the defending Super Bowl champs, and I think that game's gonna have too much juice from the fans. I just don't see it them losing that game. Week 1, big off Super Bowl win. second game, San Francisco game, I have San Francisco by murder. Buffalo and the Jets. I had a tough time picking this one, to be honest with you. Like I you got the hype train the Jets are, but Buffalo has been the top of that division this whole time. So I think this one's I think I'm gonna go with Buffalo on this one. Probably like a 3-point game or so. The Cincinnati and Cleveland game, like Nick said, I think Cincinnati just has too much firepower, so I think they'll win that one pretty handedly.
Yeah.
And the last one, Miami and the Chargers, I actually think Miami's going to win. I just had that. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I just got that feel in my gut. It's early game.
I like Bama and I like Tua.
Tua usually gets his concussion about week 5, but the first 4 weeks he's like a Super Bowl MVP.
That's fair. That's like, as long as he's not laying on the ground throwing up gang signs. I mean, he can throw a ball, right?
Yeah, but that don't happen to like week 7 before a hip injury, concussion syndrome.
Yeah, concussion syndrome.
At that point, he has at this point. It's like a 6th concussion he's had in 2 years.
That reported.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Kyle, how do you look at this slate of games?
So our first game, Detroit and Kansas City. To me, the best time to upset a team is the first week. I think Detroit goes into Kansas City, shootout of a game. I think Detroit pulls it out. Big game for both of them. This is going to be a high 30s for both teams to low 40s. It's just going to be a great game. Great offensive game. Now let's go to a defensive game. 2 smash mouth teams going at it, San Francisco and Pittsburgh. I mean, I feel bad for those offenses having that as your first game. Man, you're going to get hit. It's going to hurt. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Bosa still hasn't got a contract agreement yet.
You're right.
Yeah. But even with that, I think Christian McCaffrey runs down the throat. I think Purdy gets it. Give me San Francisco on that one.
Well, he better figure something out because I've got him in our sleeper league, and he's still listed as DNR, so he better start NRing or just Ring and reporting because I'm ready to make sure I have those fantasy points that week.
Well, I'll tell you, if they don't figure it out by week 3, that defense is going to start getting a little wore down without him, so they better figure it out. Cincinnati at Cleveland, I will never go against Joe Burrow. On top of that, Deshaun Watson, he's still not where he was 2 years ago. Going against Cincinnati, that's going to be a hard game. So give me old Joe Burrow, baby. Cincinnati's going to win that. Buffalo at New York Jets. New team coming in with New York Jets, even over half of them are Packers. Still a bunch of new people coming in. Give me the Buffalo Bills to win that one week 1. And then I think the Chargers are just too much for Miami. I think their offensive power is going to be just too much. I don't think Tua, they're going to play pretty safe with him, especially with all the concussions last year. Give me the Chargers on that game.
I gotcha. Caleb, what you thinking, man?
All right, so starting off my predictions, when it comes to Detroit and Kansas City, I have to say one of my favorite coaches in the NFL right now is Dan Campbell, and I really love the energy that he's brought over to the Detroit Lions, and the Lions definitely aren't the same old Lions that we're all so used to, but unfortunately the Chiefs are still the same old Chiefs that we are used to. So I think that the Lions make a strong impression on the rest of the league and put up a really, really good performance. And I think it's going to be close, but I think the Chiefs just have that little bit more talent on the offensive side of the ball. I think they take it home. With the 49ers and Pittsburgh Steelers, I tell you, I think we're going to see some of the best defensive play across the league, in game 1, which is going to be excellent. But I think that the 49ers also, Brock Purdy, unless he completely lays an egg, he has more offensive weapons that will make him be able to take the W home to San Francisco. For the Bengals and the Browns, I think this will be a really, really fun game to watch. But just like what Kyle said, I'm not betting against Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are able to win easy. I do think it will be a good game. I don't necessarily think it'll be a blowout, but I think the Bengals win it handily. With Buffalo and the Jets, I agree with BB. I think that the New York Jets have certainly had a lot of hype. I think they're going to have a good season, but I'm just not buying into all of the hype until I see more evidence on the field. So, like BB said, the Buffalo Bills, they have ruled their own division, and I don't think that's going to change game one. So I think Buffalo takes that home. No, I've been watching Hard Knocks. It's good television. So with the LA Chargers, I have them beating the Dolphins. I think we're going to be looking at one of the most explosive offenses in the entire league in the LA Chargers. I think the Dolphins could have a very explosive offense too, but as I can't remember who brought it up, but the offensive line questions on the Dolphins, I think that's just a bridge too far for them to overcome. So I'm thinking LA Chargers win this one, and they win it easy.
All right. Well, I'll throw mine in the pot really quick. Starting off, Detroit, Kansas City. I think that's actually going to be a tight game for the most part. I think that Detroit is actually going to go up early, and then Kansas City figures out some of their kinks later on. But I still think Detroit's going to come out on top. I think that I don't think it's necessarily great that Mahomes is having to cycle through receivers every year. That being said, I know we still got Kadarius Toney and Isaac Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the backfield. And of course, Travis Kelce is one of the staples of that offense. But in the same token, too, I think there's going to be a couple miscues here and there. I think Detroit is a more whole of a team, and I think they actually sneak out that what we would consider an upset in week one. San Francisco and Pittsburgh. Hayes, I hope you're listening to this. I will never in a million years pick Pittsburgh to win a game, ever. Not with Kenny Small Hands Pickett. Najee Harris is falling apart at the seams as we saw last year. The Pittsburgh Steelers against the 49ers, especially the 49ers. After what we talked about today, there's no way. 49ers by a million. So Cincinnati and Cleveland. I have Cincinnati winning with an asterisk beside it. Now, I'm not going to change it. I've already got it written down on paper. I do think that if Joe Burrow does not play week one, I think Cleveland wins. But I am going in this with the assumption that he will play. Joe Burrow plays. They beat Cleveland. I think Deshaun Watson still has a decent game, and I think Amari Cooper shows signs of the old Amari Cooper. But I think it's going to be Cincinnati all the way. Buffalo and New York. The Jets. I think the hype train's too big. I think the Jets are going to take it. I've said it last week. I think the Bills are on a downhill slope. And I think the Jets are going to take advantage of that. I think the Jets are going to be a scary team in that division and even in the AFC. So I think they come out with a win week one, and then finally Miami and the Chargers. I think the Chargers win. I just think that the Chargers are going to be just an insane offensive machine. I think they have the pieces on defense to keep offensive teams at bay. This is going to be a good test this week with Miami. But this could be realistically a statement game for the Chargers saying hey, this could be our year. So I'm definitely going the Los Angeles Chargers. Well, since we're done with our game predictions and mostly done with the NFL today, we're going to switch our topic back to college football. Week one is past. We have kind of seen we've seen some stuff that we expected to see. We saw some surprises on our end, especially. So the first thing we want to talk about, we're not going to do too much recapping, but I do want to talk about the game of the week this week, which we kind of all came to a consensus and said it was Colorado and TCU. I'll just open the floor here for you guys. What did we think about that game?
Travis Hunter is going to be the first Heisman two-way player.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Yes, if he continues
If he-
to play to both sides of the ball all year, Heisman.
And honestly, right now the top two, I think, me personally, the top two Heisman candidates are Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter.
Yes.
So I'm going to say this, and God, this is probably going to come back to bite me like all of our predictions last week. I don't know if he's going to be able to sustain it. I really don't. That's a
Sanders
lot.
or Hunter?
No, Hunter for sure. I think Shedeur Sanders will at least be at the ceremony for the Heisman if he continues to play like he did. I mean,
We may be looking at a scenario where it's two players from the same team.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, 501 yards passing and 4 touchdowns, correct?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's wild. But really with Hunter, like I said, I think he may get burned out. I think eventually he's going to have to pick a side or maybe play like a majority of one side and then come in and like situational stuff. But I mean, you could be right. If he does continue the way he's going, he's absolutely going to make it too.
And like I said, I think he can because, I mean, granted, he did the same thing last year at Jackson State. Granted, it's not, not big boy level, but I mean,
but going off that too, Jackson State, that's in the deep South. That's heat all the time, almost all of the season. You go to Colorado, season gets longer. You start getting a little more cooler weather. It starts getting easier on the body, and it's very possible.
Altitude factors into that too.
Yeah,
I mean, he's been up there at training camp during the summer, so I feel like he should be acclimated to it. I feel like honestly,
Colorado
he played better away from Colorado.
Colorado, I think a very underrated part was the play calling. I mean, that was the best situation that he could have put Shedeur in. And I'm not saying, I mean, Shedeur played special. And if the offense, that play calling stays the same, they've got the receivers. And it looked like the O-line too, for Shedeur to end up in the top 5, top 10, the passing yards out of everybody if they continue to throw the ball as much as they did. And they had enough running attempts and a deep enough, backfield that they were still able to sustain some of the runs. So, but I'm definitely not ready to say Colorado's, playoff bound. I still think they could be if they're not careful, I could still see them being an 8-5 team. But with Travis Hunter, though, talking about sustainability, I think now, after seeing how gassed he kind of was towards the end playing, granted he still played, great. I could see him kind of limiting that.
Going off another thing we got to keep in mind, TCU last year was ranked 130th in defense.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very important thing to remember. And another thing, TCU lost their game award winning QB. He was one of the biggest reasons they made it to the playoffs because he was there to win.
And receiver to the Chargers.
Are we still pretending they're good? They were good last year.
Well, they're not. BB, I wouldn't even say they were bad. I mean, they made it to the playoffs. It's hard to go, But this year, I think they're not as good as they were last year. And that's if your defense is even worse than 130th from last year. And don't get me wrong, congrats, Deion Sanders. I'm an idiot. I'm sorry I said you were going to regret leaving Jackson, Mississippi. But Nebraska's got a little better defense. Let's see what they do next week.
Oh, big! Can you hear the Big Ten coming out?
I don't count Nebraska as a Big Ten.
Yeah, it's fair. Caleb, anything to add on that?
Honestly, Kyle said the first thing that was on my mind. Mr. Sanders, I am sincerely sorry for the ignorance I expressed on last week's podcast. I understand you kept the receipts. I please ask that you throw mine away. I don't care what you do with these other dumbasses. Just don't keep mine.
I mean, me, Nick, and BB usually just like make idiots out of ourselves anyway. So, I mean, that's not going to be anything new for us.
It's our trademark.
I regret nothing.
Yeah. Besides the financial advice you gave me.
And to Texas A&M University.
Man, that's your fault.
Yeah. So we talked about game of the week, and the player of the week kind of coincides with. I mean, obviously we talked about him here, but I think it was pretty much consensus that Shedeur Sanders was player of the week. Not maybe because of shock value, or maybe because it was 501 yards and 4 touchdowns, but
no interceptions.
No interceptions.
That's the big thing for me.
Yeah.
Very,
The decision making was there. Mm-hmm. So, before we move on, does anybody else have anything to say that we could talk about with Shedeur Sanders?
Much of a discredit to TCU's defense. They were still, again, they were ranked towards the last group in defense, but Colorado won one game last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's that, that's the big tone. It's not a matter of how good TCU is this year or how underwhelming they were last year, even reaching the national championship. It's more so a fact of he took Colorado with his 80-something transfers, and he just beat a ranked opponent that they were, an underdog by 20 points. So that says something, and Shedeur gets, 80% of that credit for his play.
And Kyle and I were talking about that more right after the Colorado game had finished up. And one of the things that I said is if Deion Sanders carries this team to, being a 2 or 3 loss team, I think he is in major consideration for Coach of the Year anyway.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a big bounce back from what they were. So, you can take it into consideration it's a whole different team. Literally a whole different team. I don't see why you couldn't.
We should look at too. I just pulled up their schedule. Their toughest road game is Oregon. Oregon and Utah.
With Oregon with Bo Picks?
Yeah. Hey.
I would not be surprised. He's having fun. This could be Bo Nix's dark horse year for a Heisman contender. I'm just saying.
But but they get USC at home in Colorado, and they get Oregon in 3 weeks, and then the last game of the season against Utah. So
that's still not a fun schedule. Hard. Yeah, it's still not a fun schedule.
Utah's a hard hitting team. They beat Florida pretty good without their starting quarterback, and that goes back to their defense just playing smash mouth, put your ass on the ground defense, and we'll see.
Well, but I'm just saying, it's after if they keep that play up, 3 losses is not that crazy.
No, absolutely not. So, and that's something I kind of explained. I think either me and Nick were talking about it. Or maybe me and BB, I can't really remember. But one thing you have to factor in consideration is that, no coach their first year has a college football playoff year. Nick Saban's first year at Bama, he went what was it, 8-4?
Lost to ULM.
Yeah,
they lost to ULM. So, we really can't be expecting too much out of. Well, let me rephrase that. It would be asinine to consider too much out of Deion Sanders because of coaches past. But if they keep up what they're doing now against teams that they're playing, like Nebraska, like Oregon, like Utah, we could be surprised.
But to that point about how Alabama lost to ULM, Colorado had 80 plus D1 transfers into their program.
81.
80, yeah. So, there was a lot. I know there's Alabama or tight end receiver. He had a big game there.
Yeah.
So
Sanders.
Yeah.
I guess one thing I got to say too is how much of that is motivation. You had all season of people talking bad about your team, saying, "Oh, you're not going to do it. They're probably not even going to make it to the bowl game." How much of this was motivation going into this game, and are they still going to have that motivation next week? Are we going to see a drop off play because of that?
And I think that's the X factor of Deion Sanders. Everybody I've talked to, if anyone doesn't like Deion Sanders, they say it's because he's egotistical. They say it because he's cocky, overconfident. But the thing is, if he's able to channel that through his players, especially at a school like Colorado, that's where you're playing a whole different ball game. Humbleness doesn't apply when your pride is on the field.
Absolutely.
And also, I feel like TCU has been scared to play this game since after the national championship. As soon as Dion went there and all those players came in, they were shitting their pants waiting on this game to come.
Yeah.
And
Well,
another thing to remember too, and I'll end it on this on my part, but they played at TCU. Talking about motivation as a factor, they weren't in front of their home crowd with all this, momentum. They played in a hostile, sold-out TCU stadium, and so I mean, it was a true road game. It wasn't like next week when they play Nebraska, they're at home. I mean that's gonna be a messy game for Nebraska. So it was impressive that they did it in front of that sold out Texas crowd.
right. Yeah.
And, I guess the last thing I want to say is USC at Colorado, September 30th. That's gonna be a good one.
Yeah.
Good one.
Well, moving on from our, game of the week, player of the week. One thing we're going to do now is we're going to make complete idiots out of ourselves because we are going to do way too early college football playoff predictions. Let me pull up our handy dandy whiteboard here that we made about 30 seconds before this podcast started. And make sure, Caleb, you can see this, right?
Yes, sir.
Just making sure. So we have listed in no particular order, and I know the numbers aren't matching up, but let me explain that. We have listed our 4 teams that we think is going to get into the college football playoff. Along with that, we have basically put our first 2 out, which is obviously 2 teams at the bottom with stars beside them. So starting with Kyle, if you want to kind of break down, not necessarily break down the top 4, but like I'm more interested in the outlier teams, like why you guys picked those teams.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll run through the first 4, quickly. Bama last year getting shut out. Never doubt Nick Saban coming off a year like that. He's going to have that team ready. I think they make the playoffs. Michigan in the Big Ten. We also Ohio State play Saturday. They sure don't know what the hell they're doing anymore at offense. Give me Michigan winning that easily. Utah with their defense in the Pac-12. I think they take that. I think they go undefeated and they make the playoffs. Clemson, and the reason I picked Clemson is they have Florida State at home. That's going to be the deciding factor. I think that's why they make it into the playoffs. But going into my outliners, man, Florida State, dang. I mean, God, they came out there and just made LSU look.
I think they're the real deal.
School. Yeah. A great QB play. I have his name just slipped my tongue. I can't remember.
Travis.
I feel kind of bad.
Travis. Yep. Jordan Travis, if I'm
yes.
not mistaken.
Yep. He scrambled. He got out the pocket. He threw it where he needed to throw it. Just great. They need to clean up their penalties. I think once they get that cleaned up, though, they're going to be looking just amazing. But like I said, playing at Clemson, that's a hard place to win. Give me Clemson in that game. That's why they're on the outliner. But, if they play again in the ACC championship, we'll see. We will see. Georgia, man, what a joke of a schedule. What a joke of a schedule. God, they should feel terrible. Don't give me that, 6 years ago. You're an SEC program. Don't schedule something like that. That is terrible. Give me Tennessee actually beating them.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's going to keep them out because how weak their schedule is. Tennessee is going to be in the SEC championship against Bama, where I think Bama beats them. I think Bama beats them twice this year, actually. But Georgia loses 1 game, they're done. They don't have the schedule, and they can't argue and say like, "Oh, well, we won last year." Yeah, you're playing UT Martin. What a joke.
Well, BB, you look, you were prepared to say something right there, so why don't you go ahead with yours?
So my 2 outliers are Colorado and FSU. The reason why I don't have FSU in there, all right, I'm looking at the schedule. So they dog walked LSU.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about that.
And you want to bring up weak schedules? The only other ranked opponent FSU will play is Clemson, in 2 weeks? 2 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So on the same argument you used for Georgia, the same thing could happen to Florida State. But that game, the only thing that I don't know where the Tennessee Georgia game is. I think it's actually that is the same situation because that game's in Knoxville this year.
Yeah, I was about to say that game's in Knoxville.
So-
yeah.
Yep.
I think they lose that game just because it's they're playing away. But really, if they win that game, they can just sleepwalk and they'll be in the playoffs.
Fair.
So,
Yeah.
And Colorado, that's my hot take for this year, is they barely miss because they lose to like Utah or USC.
All right. Nick, what do you think about your top 6?
Kyle is still an idiot about his Georgia pick.
Here we go.
I think Georgia, even if they do have that one loss, as long as it's not the SEC championship, they're in. SEC champion is essentially a lock at this point, as long as it's a 1 or 2 loss team. I'd say 2 loss. Texas is my most worrisome out of my 4 guaranteed in, because I think the Bama game is going to be their qualifying game. And I mean, they'll have to play Oklahoma, but I still think even if they have a tight, loss to Oklahoma, I still think Texas goes in. But Texas, they got to step it up. They looked rusty. Michigan and FSU. FSU's the real deal. They're gonna. It's a dogfight between them and Clemson for the ACC. I would say. I wouldn't say Miami. Michigan cakewalk. They're going to beat Ohio State again. My 2, I still have LSU on the out 6, even though it was a really bad first game. And you saw them almost get in last year with 2 losses. But LSU's schedule is set up for them if they don't lose again. Again, the biggest game is going to be the Alabama game because they're at Alabama. But other games, they've got home field advantage. Like, let's see, they play Florida, but Florida looked ass. Say Arkansas, but still, I mean, those kind of games, I think they can win. And then all of a sudden, if they beat Bama, they're right back in the SEC championship. I still think they have a path. So I definitely wouldn't say they're eliminated. I still think they're a great team. I think Brian Kelly, he's going to use this kind of like he did with the last time they lost, where he's going to use this and really get these guys motivated. Or it could go the absolute other way, and they become quickly a 7-5 team. And then Clemson, again, it's between them or FSU. So that's mine.
Yep. Caleb, what's on your mind?
So for me, as far as the Big Ten goes, I have to consider Ohio State and Michigan a lock. At this point, they're the ones running the show in the Big Ten. For Alabama and UGA, I kind of have to echo some of the other reasons people were putting earlier, but at this point, I have to consider them a lock for the SEC. But where I feel like I've put in a pretty good bit of thought is I'm thinking Tennessee as my first outlier.
Mm-hmm.
I really think it's a possibility that they somehow manage to get into the college football playoff. They play both Alabama and Georgia in the regular season, and likely will have to play Alabama again in the SEC championship. And depending on where the cards fall, I think there's opportunities for them to have that path to get into the college football playoff. I think where they'll get a little bit of help, at least in the SEC West, I think Auburn is highlighting 2 games in particular, I think, this season. I think they have placed a huge emphasis on preparing for Georgia and a huge emphasis on preparing for the Iron Bowl. Hugh Freeze is wanting to make a statement.
As always.
So when it comes to those 2 games, I mean, I've seen questionable Auburn teams pull it off in my lifetime. And
they almost did it last year.
Well,
exactly.
Regal.
Every time they've won.
Let me just say, I'm scared of Hugh Freeze. I mean, there's not a coach in the SEC that has a more active win record against Nick Saban than Hugh Freeze.
Oh,
If it
go
gets-
ahead, BB. Go ahead, BB. Go ahead. Roll Tide.
know,
Roll Tide. What you got?
Roll Tide, Roll Tide. If you,
Hold
if you
on.
get
Let me
scared
also
of them,
let me also
you
just
know
point
that,
out my Oklahoma
Auburn
as
has
well.
a hooker service we can call if you ever get too scared of them.
Yeah. Well,
And I have Oklahoma in there because it's nasty anytime you see one team hang 73 points on another team unanswered. So I know it's
well,
Arkansas
if that's
State.
the case, where is Oregon?
Yeah.
I trust
on
Oklahoma
Portland
more.
State Community College.
That poor duck did 546 push-ups, Caleb.
Yeah, the Ducks wings.
And I'm
small.
sure he's jacked. But
Yeah,
I'm
he's gonna be
taking the
starting middle
Sooners.
linebacker next week.
Yeah.
You know, at least Baylor or Texas State beat Baylor, but what Oklahoma did to Texas State set the conference back 10 years.
Yeah.
Imagine making a head coach cry on national TV. That's pretty.
Or Butch.
It's always Butch. Everything. Like,
I don't know. I feel like Tennessee fans right now are like, good. That's what we. That's
Oh, they're relishing every moment
Go
of
for
it.
81.
and they're like, "Where's your champions of life now?"
Yeah. Where's your microphone at? Yell at people during practice, you idiot.
I saw
Okay.
a question real quick. What do you say to your team after they've seen you crying and you're down 73-0? What do you say in the locker room right after?
I'm resigning.
I think I go home and say, "Hey guys, I'm gonna go hug my wife." I think that's what I
No,
say.
honestly, probably looked at him and said, "I'm just gonna be real with y'all. Next year, I'm gonna be a football analyst for Nick Saban to try to
Yeah.
get
I'm
my
gonna
career
go.
back
I'm
on
gonna go
track."
take that job with SEC Nation.
Yeah. Yeah. You
They'll
guys,
take
go
anyone.
ahead. Go ahead and start dropping names in the pot for your next head coach. But
You know who was sorry, but do you know who was a one-time head coach of Arkansas State? Hugh Freeze.
Oh my goodness.
And they hit dire straits when Hugh Freeze went to Ole Miss.
You know, Arkansas State's really had a good run of coaches.
They really
From Gus
Till now.
Malzahn, Brian Harsin, now Hugh Freeze.
yeah, Arkansas State's a feeder school for Auburn for coaches.
Butch
Just like
Jones, 2030, baby.
all right. Anyway, BB's. Let's see. Is there a way we can mute him? I guess that leaves my predictions. Just to go through the top four real quick, I think Tennessee wins the SEC outright. I think they beat Georgia. I think they beat either Alabama or LSU in the SEC championship game. Michigan, I think they handled the Big Ten pretty easy. I think that's pretty clear cut. Florida State with the ACC. I mean, I think they run through the ACC. I think Clemson is still reeling from last year. I think Clemson will be better as a team, but I think their record will be similar because I think there's going to be some better teams in the ACC that they have to deal with, or possibly get upset by like a South Carolina or something like that, you know. So, and then Georgia, I think Georgia squeaks in because I think their one loss goes to Tennessee, and then they're not able to play in the SEC championship game, and then they jump whatever two loss SEC West SEC West contender. Then I have Texas. I like Texas, man. I do. I think they're kind of on a revenge tour from last year. I think especially Quinn Ewers. I think they'll give Bama some trouble this week. So I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of scoot their way up and beat Oklahoma this year, beat Bama next week, and then somehow finagle a way to get in there. And then at 6, I have USC just because I don't think their schedule is that hard. I believe most of the hype behind Caleb Williams. I think he is a good quarterback. I think he's going to get hurt a little bit not having like Jordan Addison from last year, but I think they will be able to get through their schedule with one loss and potentially be up there. And then like Oklahoma is also that's a viable opinion. But like I said, I think Texas and USC are going to be more realistic. So, all right. Well, here's some of our favorite times of the show. We're going to go to week 2 game predictions. Right quick, I want to go over the records for everybody from last week. So right now we have Caleb at 1-4. Great job, buddy.
Thanks, West Virginia.
Kyle, Nick, and BB all are at 2 and 3. And then I somehow squeezed it out to make it 3 and 2.
Hey,
So
I just want to make it clear: if I wasn't bullied last week, I'd be tied with you.
Don't you do
That's
that.
That's what you
Don't
do
you
in
dare
interviews.
do that.
pick Tulane over South Alabama. Like you would have had, like you wouldn't be doing this podcast alone. All four of us would be up there, like walking you through what to say, even though you would have been right.
You'd been tied up in a storage unit somewhere by now.
Yeah, he'd be on a T-shirt right now.
Back of a milk carton.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm just 3.5 hours from BB. I could pick him up on the way to Milwaukee.
Yeah. Have you seen this idiot? All right. Well, going into our games this week. This week we have Mississippi and Tulane. Then we have Texas A&M versus Miami. We have Iowa versus Iowa State. Texas versus Alabama, and Stanford versus USC. We'll do this a little bit different than we did the NFL picks. We'll go game to game. So, Kyle, let's hear your Mississippi versus Tulane pick.
Yeah, give me Ole Miss. Hugh Freeze got that offense running really good. I think they're gonna just run over Tulane.
What?
You need to fast forward a couple years.
Who's
I meant Lane Kiffin. My bad. That's on me.
Lane Kiffin is calling Hugh Freeze every play.
Yeah.
Right
We
here.
were just on a tangent about it, might be, but Lane Kiffin's got them running really good. I think their offense is going to be a little too much for Tulane.
Okay, Caleb.
I tend to agree with Kyle. To be honest, as much attention as that one touchdown that Mercer managed to score against Ole Miss on Saturday, as much attention as that got, I don't think it looks good for Tulane. There's a significant amount of competition in the blood of the defensive coordinators and the whole defense as a whole for giving up that one touchdown. So I think that's going to make it even worse for Tulane's offense. And just like Kyle said, I think Ole Miss's offense is just going to swamp Tulane.
BB, you shaking your head like you seem to disagree.
Oh yeah, Michael Pratt is going to make Pete Golding retire. As all I'm say. Every time he sees the opposing quarterback drop back, he shits himself because he knows he's going to give up at least 15 yards and a first down.
Oh,
And
Nick,
honestly, he looked good, I guess, last week.
yeah.
So
Nick, would you like to agree or disagree with BB?
I agree. I still pick Ole Miss. I think it's going to be one of those 50-24 kind of games. I think Tulane will put up some points and kind of expose Pete Golding a bit. But I still think there's a good tier list there for Ole Miss to kind of take it away and just outscore them. But Tulane will score a good bit.
Yeah, and I mean, after this week, I think I would rather floss my teeth with a wooden spoon than ever see Tulane win another game. So that being said, I'm going to go with Ole Miss, just out of spite. Next game, Texas A&M versus Miami. BB, let's start with you here. Who do you got in this matchup?
I got Texas A&M. I don't believe Miami for nothing.
Okay.
They skull drug the Miami of Ohio, but I think with Motorcycle Men calling the offense, I think they're actually going to score points and win by like 2 touchdowns instead of a field goal like they did last year.
All right. Nick?
Opposite. This is Jimbo's last year at Texas A&M. Miami, now this is not me saying I'm bought into Miami. Tyler Van Dyke did have a good game, but I think Miami, they do this every year. They cause themselves to win enough early games to give them hype before they implode. I think Miami will win by about 10, 14 points. Texas A&M, they looked sloppy to begin against New Mexico State. I don't see it. They're playing at Miami, so I just don't see a route for Texas A&M yet.
Okay. Caleb.
So I'm going to go with Miami, just like in alignment with Nick. I have to be honest, in watching that Texas A&M New Mexico game on Saturday, I have to say, like, early on, Texas A&M looked really, really sloppy. So, granted, Miami hasn't really beat a serious contender or anything like that. Just like Nick said, I'm not bought in to Miami for the season. But I think they can lay it to Texas A&M.
All right. And then Caleb, or not Caleb, you're Caleb. Kyle.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Miami here. They looked good against Ohio of Miami, or Miami of Ohio.
Ohio.
Hugh Freeze of Ohio.
But I
Double O, double H, double I, double O.
I feel like Miami's a lot better than they were last year, and I think they're gonna definitely cover the spread. And I wouldn't be shocked if Miami pulled off an upset against a Clemson or Florida State this year. They look a lot better. Don't call me a believer, but don't call me a doubter on them.
Like Nick said, this is Jimbo's last year in A&M. They're gonna, as Kyle said last week, they're gonna shell out that oil money to get him out of there, and they're gonna start anew. The Jimbo experiment is done after this year. Moving on. Iowa versus Iowa State. Let's start with the Big Ten analyst on the channel, Kyle.
Boy, oh boy, 2 touchdown passes by Iowa last week. Put it in the history books. It's over with. Iowa defense is going to be way too much for Iowa State. And you know what? Maybe they'll get another touchdown pass that game, but they're going to definitely win it.
Yeah. Caleb?
I have to agree with Kyle there. It's going to Iowa. So I'm gonna agree with Kyle, and he pretty much took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, Nick.
Y'all are making me pick this game. Iowa. I'm not gonna watch it. I doubt I'll see highlights from it. Iowa.
BB.
This probably be the only time I ever agree with Kyle about anything, but yeah, I was going to win this one by like 3 touchdowns at least.
Yeah, I'll take Iowa as well. That's about it.
Is this played in the cornfield? I'm just curious. Like the Battle of the Corn in Iowa.
Honestly.
Yeah, I was about to say it's like the Field of Dreams, except playing on a field. They're playing in the middle of the actual cornfield.
The Corn Cob Cup.
They have bowl games at the Yankee Stadium. They should play this game at the Field of Dreams in Nebraska.
Yeah, exactly.
The baseball game would be higher scoring.
Yeah.
Hey, it was at 1 year.
Yeah.
It was.
Moving on to probably going to be our most controversial game of the week. Texas versus Alabama. BB, why don't you start us off on this?
Roll Tide, Paul.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. But Tide, Paul.
All right.
I think. No, but seriously, I think.
I was hoping that was it. I was hoping that was it. Please expound upon your point of how Alabama's so good and Jalen Milroe's the Heisman and Nick Saban is Jesus Christ incarnate and keep anything else.
I ain't gonna lie. I watched maybe like 5 minutes of Bama game last week because I was watching. Some people call it a football game. But I think Bama's just going to run the ball, take the air out of it. So put the pressure on Quentin Ewers to score every time they get the ball because they might not get the ball all that much this week.
All right. Let's go with Caleb.
All right. So I have to agree with BB. Even though BB didn't watch very much of the Alabama game, I have to say it sounds like he did. I think it's going to be very run heavy, just like BB said. They're going to keep it very situational with Texas and make sure that they take advantage of every possession. But one thing I will say, having actually watched a pretty good bit of the Alabama game, is I would really like to see some passing plays that give me more confidence in Jalen Milroe's passing ability, because after watching that game, I don't have very high confidence in it.
Yeah. I mean, if Texas can stop the run, which is, I mean, on that right side with Caden Proctor and Otis, the right side, 6'7", 350 athletic.
Don't know.
They can stop
Anyway.
that and they have a chance. But I think it's gonna be a tall task for them, especially in Tuscaloosa.
Okay. Cool. Kyle.
Texas got that experience with the QB, and that's a big factor. But Tuscaloosa night game, that's a hard task. Give me Alabama. I hate to say it. Yada yada. I don't want to hear nothing from you, BB.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Nick.
So, it's going to be a sloppy one. I think it's going to be a couple turnovers each. I mean, Texas defense, they picked off Jaden Daniels a couple times, and I think there's going to be Bama makes one more mistake. And when that happens, I think Texas will take it. But it's going to be a low-scoring, kind of sloppy game.
4 words. Quinn Ewers' revenge game. Remember, he got borderline targeted and then landed upon and broke his collarbone in the first half of the Bama game last year. And then on top of that, too, there was the insane call about the targeting or roughing the passer call where Bryce Young was somehow upside down and threw the ball and was still going to the ground and got hit, and that was roughing the passer.
Yeah, it's called being an athlete.
Making an effort, Grayson.
Okay. Well, the officials that game really made some efforts to throw a flag on that play. So that being said, I think since they got one out of Texas in Austin, I think I think this is the game that they plan for. I know Texas is like their big rival is Oklahoma, but I think Sarkisian has been planning for this ever since the Sunday after that game. Quinn Ewers' revenge game. Texas goes over. Stanford and USC. Let's go with. I'll start this one off. I think Stanford doesn't have a cold chance in hell. So I think it's got pretty straightforward. I think it's going to be Southern California. Caleb Williams shows out. Nick?
I'd agree. I mean, I don't see any path for Stanford to win unless Caleb Williams goes down with injury. I mean, it's just too much firepower. Defense really doesn't even matter. Stanford doesn't have that great of an offense anyways. So it's going to be – I think it's just going to be another game on USC's schedule that they just kind of breeze through like the beginning of the season.
Yeah. Kyle?
So Pac-12 at dark, weird things happen. USC defense makes anybody's offense looks like they belong in the NFL. Give me Stanford and an upset.
All right. BB? Wait, stop. I ignored the last thing that you said.
That's what
I said no, Kyle. USC is going to kill Stanford. Stanford hadn't been relevant since Christian McCaffrey was there.
Holy. Okay, and then Caleb, we got to move on from this. I'm having a mini stroke.
Well, judging from the way he's talking, Kyle's had the stroke. Yeah, USC wins this one easily. It's not going to be hardly a contest, and USC's just going to show all the more why the Pac-12's dying.
Yeah. Well, moving on from our picks, right quick, want to talk about our upset watch of the week, which is App State versus UNC, North Carolina. Just opening the floor here for everybody. What does App State have to do to beat North Carolina this week?
Drake May.
Yeah,
I mean, it's plain and simple. It's going to be they need to possess the ball. They need to take away, with the new rule where the clock does not stop on first downs except for the last 2 minutes of the half and at the end of the game. They need to slow the ball down. Last several times, App State is the one team to do it. based on their recent upset success. They just need to limit possessions for North Carolina, and that's what they did last year and won. So, I mean, I think it's going to be very similar. But again, this is an upset alert for a reason. It's not us saying that we predict this to happen, but this is the most likely, and I would agree that that's how they do it.
Yeah.
Going off App State's game last week, if they start off that slow like they did last week, they don't have a prayer. North Carolina is going to put points up. You're going to have to get on that board, and you're going to have to get on that board quick. If you don't, you're going to be playing catch up, and I don't think you're going to catch up to North Carolina. So score quick, and that's your best bet.
Mm-hmm. Anything else by anybody else? No,
I think Nick said it best.
I think
Yeah, agreed.
I agree. Right, quick interjection, right quick for our last segment. Duke is beating Clemson 6-0 at the start. So just throwing that out there. Moving on.
Blue Devils.
Yeah, moving on to our last segment of the show, guys. We're adding this one. This is going to be a staple for our show every week. It is now time for Kyle's out-of-pocket pick of the week. This is where Kyle looks at the college football schedule and sees a game that he thinks is going to go well and explain it. So, Kyle, the floor is yours.
Guys, especially Caleb, Oklahoma are frauds. Every year, first game of the year, they put up 60-plus points, and every year, Oklahoma, man, they're going to be playoff. That is a joke. Do not fall for it. They are playing SMU. Let me tell you what SMU's quarterback, Mr. Preston Stone, did last week. 3 touchdown passes with 248 yards. Now, let me tell you about their running back, L.G. Johnson, 128 yards on the ground with a touchdown. You know how many passing yards Oklahoma gave up against a joke of Arkansas State team? Is 160 yards in the passing. Give me SMU to cover and cover easily, and I would not be shocked if they beat Oklahoma, because Oklahoma are frauds.
What's the spread?
I think right now it's 17.5.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Kyle,
Who?
They put the tasting agent in the computer duster so that you don't huff it, not so that you do. Okay? So Oklahoma is going to easily beat the spread on SMU. There's no doubt about it. So, I understand that we give you this segment and you got to push the envelope a little bit.
I never agreed to this.
But you don't got to run off of the cliff here.
Yeah. Well, Kyle slid me $20 for this segment. So
yeah.
I gave you 25 for not doing
it. SMU will cover that spread this weekend.
Yeah.
And we can stop the fraud talk about Oklahoma.
I also like how he caveated, easily, he could have easily just said SMU's going to beat Oklahoma, but you could tell internally he walked it back and was like, no, I'm going to talk about the spread first. And insinuate that SMU can beat Oklahoma.
Everybody at home needs to slam on the bets that Oklahoma is covering this week.
Oh,
free money.
Yeah.
Not even close.
Oh my God! If by some way he's dumb luck right, he's going to be intolerable. I'm not going to be able to do this next week.
He's going to show his balls on camera again.
All right. Well,
your phrase is going to lead SMU to victory.
Yeah, he says pantsless. Well, guys, that's it. The episode 2 of the JEB Board podcast is officially adjourned. Thanks everybody for listening at home, and we'll catch y'all next week.
Bye, guys.